What happens when a billion-dollar studio remakes a timeless classic? And forgets the magic? When Disney announced a live-action reboot of Snow White, fans expected something bold, beautiful, and nostalgic. Instead, they got a $270 million train wreck. The dwarfs disappeared, the lead actress slammed the original movie, and the internet lost its mind. The result? A box office disaster so bad it left Disney execs scrambling, and fans wondering how the world's most iconic fairy tale turned into a modern-day fiasco. But the real drama? It didn't just unfold on screen. It started the moment Rachel Zegler opened her mouth. It all started with a bold idea. Revive Snow White, the film that launched Disney's entire empire back in 1937. On paper, it sounded like a guaranteed win. The original is pure gold. A fairy tale that defined animation, enchanted generations, and cemented Disney's legacy.
Greta?
So when the studio announced a live-action remake, fans were cautiously optimistic. Then came the casting. Enter Rachel Zegler. Fresh off her breakout role in West Side Story, praised for her voice and screen presence. She looked like a promising choice, at first. Disney was banking on her rising stardom to bring in a new generation of fans while still honoring the classic. But behind the scenes, something wasn't sitting right. Whispers of a new modern direction started circulating, and suddenly the question wasn't how Disney would retell this story. It was why they were trying to reinvent it so drastically in the first place. And this was only the beginning. The next creative decision would blow the lid off the internet. If there's one thing everyone remembers from Snow White, it's the 7 dwarfs. Grumpy, Doc, Sleepy, they weren't just side characters, they were the heart of the story. So when leaked set photos revealed that the dwarfs were missing, replaced by a random group of full-sized, ethnically diverse humans, fans were stunned. The internet exploded with confusion. Was this even Snow White anymore? Turns out, the decision came after actor Peter Dinklage criticized the original portrayal of dwarfs as backward. In response, Disney went into full damage control mode, scrapping the idea of casting little people altogether and opting for CGI magical creatures instead. But instead of praise, Disney got slammed from both sides. Fans called it a betrayal of the original, while actors from the dwarfism community accused the studio of erasing roles that could have gone to real performers. The backlash was loud, and it was only getting louder. And just when it seemed the controversy couldn't grow any bigger, Rachel Zegler stepped in and made things worse. It's one thing for fans to criticize a remake. It's another when the lead actress can't stop dragging the very movie she's starring in. From the moment Rachel Zegler started doing press, it was clear she had no love for the original Snow White. In interview after interview, she called the 1937 film scary, weird, and outdated. She openly mocked the idea of a princess falling in love with a prince.
Scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Never revisited Snow White again. So I watched it for the first time in probably 16, 17 years.
Saying this version would be all about fighting her own battles. And just like that, the internet turned on her. Fast. People weren't just annoyed, they were furious. Fans felt insulted. Why cast someone in such an iconic role if she doesn't even respect it? Her comments came off as smug, dismissive, and out of touch. IT didn't help that Zegler also complained about the long filming days, implying she deserved more money just for wearing a princess dress for 18 hours.
If I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed on.
The backlash was brutal. Memes, call-outs, boycotts, it snowballed into a full-blown PR crisis for Disney. Every time she spoke, the studio seemed to panic. And unfortunately for Disney, the worst was still ahead, because the casting choices raised even more eyebrows. In the original Snow White, the evil queen's entire motivation is envy. She's furious that someone younger and more beautiful has stolen the spotlight. So, naturally, Disney needed to cast someone who could convincingly be jealous of Snow White's beauty. Instead, they cast Gal Gadot, yes, Wonder Woman herself, as the evil queen, and fans couldn't believe it. Social media erupted with one brutal observation. How is anyone supposed to believe Gal Gadot is less attractive than Rachel Zegler? Even critics who supported the remake couldn't defend this choice. The visual contrast broke the illusion entirely. One viral post joked that the magic mirror must have been cracked. Others said this might be the first time the evil queen was clearly the prettier one. And it didn't stop there. People questioned everything, from the wardrobe to the dialogue to the stiff on-screen chemistry. Viewers were already struggling to connect with Zegler's take on Snow White. Pairing her with a villain who looked more like a runway model than a wicked witch only made things worse. But as strange as the casting was, it was nothing compared to what Disney did with the budget. You'd think with $270 million on the table, yes, you heard that right, Disney would have delivered something visually breathtaking, emotionally rich, and, at the very least, controversy-free. Instead, audiences got a film that looked overproduced, underwhelming, and completely out of touch. The budget ballooned thanks to endless reshoots, CGI-heavy scenes, and what appeared to be a marketing campaign that couldn't decide what it was selling. The trailers were vague and oddly empty, sweeping landscapes, slow-motion shots, and barely any real story. The posters were worse, so bland that fans were left wondering if this was Snow White or an ad for a perfume. And all of this after Disney reportedly re-edited large parts of the film in a last-ditch attempt to soften the backlash. But the damage had already been done. No amount of visual polish could distract from the fact that the heart of the story had been replaced with something cold, confused, and soulless. If Disney thought throwing money at the problem would fix it, they were in for a rude awakening. Because when opening weekend came around, the numbers told the real story. By the time the film finally hit theaters, the writing was already on the castle walls. Early projections guessed Snow White would pull in around $50 million, a soft landing for a film with such a massive budget. But even that turned out to be wishful thinking. When the numbers came in, the reality hit hard. Just $43 million opening weekend. A staggering loss, especially for a Disney princess film. It didn't just underperform, it bombed. Major outlets called it one of the biggest flops in Disney history, and fans weren't surprised. Between the missing dwarfs, the lead star's off-putting interviews, and a complete lack of buzz, there was no magic left to draw people in. Theaters sat half empty. Online, the film became a punchline, not a must-see. It was the kind of failure that doesn't just sting, it leaves a scar. But the most shocking part? Disney's entire marketing strategy may have set them up for this fall. Disney's pitch for this remake was baffling. Instead of celebrating the charm of the original, the studio pushed a message that almost felt like an apology for its existence. The underlying vibe? Remember that magical classic you grew up loving? Well, we changed most of it, and the lead thinks the old version is dumb. But please come watch it anyway. It was a disaster in slow motion. Nostalgic fans felt betrayed. New audiences were confused. And the promotional interviews made things worse. Rachel Zegler doubled down on calling the 1937 film outdated, while distancing herself from anything that made Snow White iconic in the first place. The marketing couldn't find its footing. Was this a bold feminist retelling? A high fantasy reimagining? A gritty reboot? It didn't matter. The film seemed lost, too afraid to honor the original, but too clumsy to stand on its own. And that's when fans checked out completely. Because if even the star of the movie couldn't find joy in the fairy tale, why should anyone else? But at the heart of this mess lies a bigger question. Has Disney lost touch with its own magic? Somewhere along the way, Disney stopped telling stories and started chasing headlines. With Snow White, they didn't just miss the mark, they missed the point. This wasn't just a film about a princess and a poisoned apple. It was a symbol of innocence, wonder, and childhood joy. And in their attempt to modernize it, Disney stripped away the very soul that made it special. The dwarfs were gone. The romance was downplayed. The music barely mattered. And worst of all, the lead actress seemed completely disconnected from the fairy tale she was meant to bring to life. Fans didn't reject this movie because it was different. They rejected it because it felt hollow, manufactured, cold. In trying to prove they could reimagine a classic without the old-fashioned baggage, Disney ended up alienating the very audience that made Snow White legendary. No amount of CGI or rebranding could fix that. The result? A harsh but necessary reminder. No brand, no matter how powerful, is immune to failure, especially when it forgets why people fell in love with it in the first place. So, what really doomed Disney's Snow White? Was it Rachel Zegler's off-putting remarks? The missing dwarfs? The bloated budget and lifeless marketing? Or was it something deeper? A studio so focused on reinventing a legacy that it forgot to protect it? This wasn't just a flop at the box office. It was a warning shot to Hollywood. Audiences crave stories with heart, not hollow updates dressed in shiny visuals. You can modernize a fairy tale without mocking its roots. You can be bold without being careless. In the end, this remake became a textbook example of what happens when a beloved classic is stripped of its charm, its characters, and its soul. And the saddest part, it didn't have to be this way. So what do you think? Could Disney have salvaged this film if they'd stayed truer to the original? Or was the project doomed from the moment they changed everything fans cared about? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy breakdowns of cinematic highs and catastrophic lows, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Because if there's one thing Snow White has shown us, it's that even fairy tales can fall flat when the magic behind them goes missing.